advised that the views and opinions of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
Good evening, Philippines. Maayong gabi sa tibok Sabah, Mindanao, Visayas, ug sa Luzon. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Ako po si Erik Espina at ito ang inyong Republika. Well, so far, the casualty is 72 people killed. Several bodies of our countrymen remain buried in Sabah. We have 8 Filipinos ranging from the ages of 17 to 66 who will be facing a capital punishment, meaning literal hanging or lifetime imprisonment for terrorism or war. These is a litany of the scores which in the coming months or in the coming weeks we have to continuously keep our attention on, because we can expect the numbers to eventually increase. So tonight, we're going to focus on the politics of diplomacy, and we're very fortunate to have none other than Ambassador Lauro Baja, Senior Philippine Undersecretary for Foreign Affairs. Good evening.
Good evening, Eric.
Yes. Just as a brief review, you've been in the service for how long?
45 years.
45 years.
45 years. From 1962 to 2007.
That's 1962 is a very interesting year.
It is now, yes.
There is basis for saying that Sabah is Philippine territory.
There is basis, as I said in other interviews. The basis is solid and defendable in any fora.
And that's in the DFA archive and library?
Yes, you know, in 1963, there is a so-called North Borneo office.
Okay.
It was dedicated only to the question of North Borneo. I remember that there were at least 6 steel cabinets of papers and documents on Sabah.
Okay.
I don't know now where those papers are. If they are still in the DFA, or if not, maybe in the National Archives. Those papers are very material to the issue.
I hope they are still there, and I hope copies
so.
were made.
I hope so. Yes. Yeah.
Because it would be so dire and so. We would be so crestfallen if those papers are burned or lost for whatever motives, no?
Yes, yes.
Just like missing papers or missing letters.
Yes.
So this leads me to the question: what is the basis for? First, the position of government says the claim is dormant, and then the position moves a few degrees towards it's now being studied. Is there a need for further studies?
Yes. First of all, I think the Philippines should now define what really is our policy towards Sabah. Putting it in the back burner, so they say, is not a policy. It's an illusion. It's a mirage. So we must define now what our policy towards Sabah is. I personally believe that we should pursue the claim Yes, it has been dormant for 50 years. It slept for 50 years, but that uh, that was, I think, a sleep of the weak and the timid. We have solid basis for our claim. We should pursue it okay, bilateral if we are disposed to, and we should be ready to bring it to the international institutions which deal with dispute settlement. But we must act now before, as I said in one article, before we played too much into Malaysia's hands. Uh,
We have not yet played into Malaysia's
we
hands
are
so much.
playing into Malaysia's hands, and I think all the actions of Malaysia and all the inactions of the Philippines will lead to a situation where we will be stopped from claiming Sabah. In the recent decision of the International Court of Justice in the dispute between Indonesia and Malaysia over the islands of
Sipadan.
and Leligatan.
Yes.
Indonesia relied on historic title and on treaties.
Yes.
Malaysia countered and based its claim on the so-called effectivities, meaning exercise of acts of sovereignty over the area.
They had actual control, in short.
Yes, and the court favored Malaysia and awarded the claims to Malaysia. Why? Because the court said that Malaysia has exercised executive, legislative, and quasi-judicial acts for a number of years without interruption. And I'm afraid that if and when we are able to bring this to the ICJ or to any international institution, we may be left with the same jurisprudence. It's not only that case, because there have been cases also in Latin America where the international court in the dispute between Chile and Peru and between, I think, in Nicaragua and Colombia, the court also applied this principle of effectivities. Whoever controls, whoever exercises these acts of sovereignty will inevitably be awarded the claim. And we must avoid, and the Philippines must avoid being cornered into that position by its pronouncements and by its actions or inactions.
With that, are we not too late? Because that seems to be the position now of the ICJ.
Yeah. One silver lining which this standoff in Sabah gave us is that by this action, we sort of revived talks about Sabah. We brought some attention to Sabah, and we disturbed the continued so-called continued presence without protest or without disturbance on Sabah. So that may interrupt what I think Malaysia is doing insofar as the claim is concerned. That is giving a series of acts of sovereignty, so that if and when the case reaches the international dispute settlement, they could always plead that one.
This could be cited.
And this could be cited, yes.
When you call disturbance, this can take the nature of physical presence, legal protest, people's protest, actual movement on the ground?
All of those.
All of the above?
All those, yes. All of that means that
even an armed uprising can be considered? Or a movement, even a benign movement on the ground can be considered a disturbance?
Yes, provided you do these things in the name of exercising so-called acts of sovereignty, also because you also claim the area.
Or acts of self-determination? No.
I hasten to have reservation on self-determination, because in the UN milieu, self-determination applies only to non-self-governing territories. Those territories under decolonization. So maybe if we think of the self-determination, it should be on a different plane.
Let me go back to the previous question I asked you. The claim became dormant.
Yes.
And then you mentioned that maybe we should study it, whether it should be a policy. But now we go back to the timeline, the previous timeline of even up to the 1950s, based on House Resolution, Concurrent Resolution number 4, the 1950s, which was supposed to be jointly approved by the Senate and the House, but only the House approved it for President Crino. And then on towards 62 and onwards, different presidents. The point is, the trend of every president or the trend of every policy was pursuance and revival of the claim. That is the policy.
Let me put it this way.
Or is it every president should therefore now reform its policy and change those policies?
The claim is there, only it became an inconvenient issue for successive administration, because they always put it in the context of regional cooperation and harmonious bilateral relations.
Yes.
But I doubt if that policy protects or protected Philippine interest.
Now, my question is, when the Aquino administration says we are going to study it, is it the claim that we are studying, or are we studying it in the sense that we are going to pursue it or not pursue it? Is it a question of, do we have the basis to pursue the claim, or there is more to lose if we pursue it?
I said in one interview that the time for study is over.
Okay.
We have studied the issue over.
You mean we have overstudied it? You mean to say?
No, we have studied already, and I think the priority is not to study the merits of the case. The merits are there.
Correct.
What the Aquino administration now do is, do we pursue the claim in international fora?
You're talking about the avenues.
The avenues, yes.
Yes. Okay.
And I have advocated that we must pursue the claim, even if we lose.
Okay.
Then I was thinking that in losing, we may be able to gain some strategic space in other areas. But it is better to pursue and maybe lose in the process than to have not pursued at all.
So here is now the point. If the president is still at the mode of studying it, some people say this is overstudying already. Would that be a correct way to point it? It's overstudying?
It is a very significant way of looking at it, because I doubt if there are other factors, if there are other equations in which we have not studied. So the pivotal question now is, after having studied all these things, the study should be, is it in the national interest of the Philippines to pursue the claim?
The weight of previous administrations, even the studies made by the DFA, and all the other legal luminaries and previous presidents point towards one definite, compass. So, it behooves me, why the need to, as you said, reconsider all these things. But the president says, once and for all. He uses that term, once and for all. Is that a good justification?
I hope the president meant that once and for all, let's see if we should pursue it or not. Not once and for all that we should study again. There's nothing to study anymore. the documents are there. The other equations like bilateral relations, regional stability, geopolitics are there.
Mr. Ambassador, Malacanang, through Secretary Lasierda, said the peace process will continue because it is even bigger than the Sabah issue. Do you agree?
I have it may be that the peace process is important as of now, but if you look at the big picture,
In terms of emphasis, it is more important. The issue on the peace process for emphasis is more important than the Sabah at this point.
At this point.
Okay.
But if you look at a bigger picture, Sabah will loom large in not only in the matter of Philippine interest, but also in Philippine-Malaysia relations and in the regional context.
This brings now the needed question. Will you not have cross-border conflicts regarding the areas that the MILF is claiming vis-a-vis the Sultanate of Sulu plus the Sultanate claiming Sabah and the MILF talking about a Bangsamoro state minus Sabah?
That's one of the downsides
Uh-huh.
of pursuing the claim. But I still believe that all these concerns will fall into place after the resolution on Sabah, after the resolution of our claim on Sabah, whether we win, whether we lose, or with whatever so-called political arrangements that could be over Sabah. But we must tackle the Sabah issue now before we lose it by default.
Some people, some observers, some pundits say the issue of the peace process is separate from the issue of Sabah. From my modest view, there is an umbilical cord, if I might use that term, between the Sultanate of Sulu, the Philippine claim, the secessionist movement, and Malaysia that looms very large over the entire gamut of the fog of war, so to speak.
Yes, I agree with you. All the dramatis personae
Yes.
are there.
Yes.
All the agenda of all sides are there.
Yes.
It can only be viewed also in what, for example, Prime Minister Mahathir said some years ago by Bangsa Malay.
Yes.
It can also be viewed in the context of the so-called ambition of Malaysia.
Norme Suarez said neo-colonialist.
It can be,
Okay.
yeah, because of the projected thoughts of Malaysia to have a greater dominion over some parts of the southern Philippines, some parts of the Borneo Island, including Brunei.
Would it be safe to say Southeast Asia?
If that would be going too far, because Southeast Asia will encompass as far as Myanmar.
How about Thailand?
And Thailand.
Thailand, yes.
Thailand, I don't know if it is in the
There is a secessionist movement
there
going
is
on
a
in
secessionist
Thailand.
movement, yes.
A Malay and a Buddhist, yes. And some suspect that it is the Malaysians again behind the secessionist movement.
With how things stand, there will be quite a number of speculations on this matter. And we cannot discount the possibility of some of them being true or happening. The situation in the area is quite fluid. And for example, the so-called ASEAN solidarity and ASEAN sense of cooperation and goodwill and so forth is not as strong or as, say, 10 or 15 years ago. You will notice that especially when one thinks of how ASEAN member countries will deal with China. They do not think anymore of ASEAN China. It's either Malaysia, China, Vietnam, China,
In their individual capacity.
individual capacity.
Okay. Now, here is now the point that I wanted to make. The MNLF has admitted that they were trained, funded in an island just off the coast of peninsular Malaysia, which is Palau Pangkor. They have admitted this, the top 90 leaders. No? And even the MNLF say, the MILF is also funded and trained by Malaysia. Okay. This is a ricochet liberation movement after the Jabida, so-called Jabida massacre. Now, given that as the background, are we gaining in the bilateral relations with Malaysia, given that the cost of the secessionist movement in Mindanao has, in terms of economic loss, lives lost, appropriations of government, if we're going to make a cost-benefit analysis, did we gain more from the bilateral relationship with Malaysia vis-a-vis the trouble that they have made in our country?
As things stand, I don't think that we have gained in a cost-benefit ratio insofar as bilateral relations is concerned over the present state of Philippine-Malaysian relations. There was even a speculation, which I heard, that the Philippines, for all this what's going on, can be blindsided by
Correct.
the dramatis personae. For all you know, those people in the South who are involved now might just say, okay, the Philippines is not taking care of us. We
Yes.
just go and
Join the
Malaysia.
Confederation.
Yeah. And I don't know if the Philippines has ever thought of that. By our pronouncements, by our inactions, and by our actions also, we might be blindsided not only by Malaysia but our people in the South who feel neglected in their claims, in their aspirations. And this is one possibility which we must also look into.
Why the over-eagerness, not only of this administration, but even of previous administrations, to deal with, well, before Kuala Lumpur, now Putrajaya? Why the over-eagerness to, I don't want to use the word to be supine, but to somehow bend backwards and accommodate Putrajaya when Republika returns?